I don't need to explain in the Founder Studio interview format again, do I? We know what we're doing, so we're going to start right away. I really want to hit the ground running, so I'm going to start with a question that I think, feel free to ask any question to Eric, and I'm going to start with one that nobody will ask anyways, even though I said that. How do you make money?
No, I'm happy to talk business model. That's the theme of the day, right? Yeah, my money comes from three basic sources. Primarily, most of the money I have made in my life has come through equity ownership in startups. So startups that I built myself.
Is there a microphone?
Yeah, this didn't seem to be on, but does someone know what?
Okay, just project for a second.
I'll do my best. I've been doing basically 2 events a day and then like 3 or 4 media interviews. So actually, this is as loud as I physically am able to talk. I used to be able to project, no longer. I'm like an old, washed-up performer. It's so sad. Yeah, so equity ownership. Being an entrepreneur has been very good to me, and I feel very lucky to have had the chance to be involved in some pretty cool companies that have provided me with a lot of net worth. And then, now I advise a lot of startups and occasionally invest in them. I have a tendency to only like to put in the first, $5,000. After that, it gets kind of boring to me. It's basically banking. That's fine for other people to do banking. It's not my thing. Yes. I'm also not very good at it. I have a consistent track record of turning down opportunities to collect equity in all of the hot companies that you would wish you had invested in, like Google and Facebook, honestly. So if you hear me turn down a job offer at a company, it might be a good time to get in.
Excuse me.
Getting things done.
It's a surprisingly intimate group. I'm told things are done differently here in London. More than just spelling the word color differently. So yeah, equity ownership. Now that I am a published author, I make money from writing. So I did pretty well with the book so far. I was paid in advance, and if I ever earn out that advance, I'll be paid royalties, 25 years from now or something. And then now I do a lot of public speaking, and speaking is a way that you make money as an author. And in fact, what I learned when I first started experimenting with this job, whatever, I don't even know what you call it, is that anyone you meet who makes their living as either an author, a consultant, or a public speaker actually does all three of those things together. That is actually the holy trinity. It's a mutually reinforcing feedback loop where your work with companies provides case studies that you get to talk about and write about, which then encourages more people to want to hire you to speak about or be their mentor, etc. So it's a virtuous cycle. And in fact, if you built a business model canvas for it and you did the math, you would be able to see how such businesses grow, and you'd be able to quantify what are the conversion rates you really need to have from those events in order to make the thing turn around. It's no different than any other business. In fact, it's relatively simple, probably, compared to some of the tough stuff you guys are doing.
So, what came first, being a lean geek or a customer development geek? What sort of drove the thinking that came into Enview that way?
Well, so the answer is actually neither. The problem was I had a set of intuitive beliefs that had no justification whatsoever, other than it just seemed right to me, based on my career as an engineer, always trying to push the teams I work with to be more customer-centric, be more iterative. And I discovered Agile and was really into Agile for quite a while. And I've documented and talked about a million times my, coming up against the shortcomings of Agile. And for some reason, when I came up against those shortcomings, I was convinced that the problem was a problem in Agile rather than a problem in me, which is ultimate hubris. And so I was putting those things into practice at Enview especially. And they did not make sense to anybody. Like now there's this whole thing, customer development and lean and, it's a thing now. But it was not a thing in 2004 when I was doing this. So people kept asking me, my co-founders would often turn to me and be like, wait, we're going to do what? And I'm like, no, trust me, as soon as we write code, we will deploy it to our server. We did that from the very beginning. I just made it a rule. In our company, our very first deployment system was we had one computer in our office, the one computer we could afford, the one shared virtual host in our co-located facility, the one server we could afford that ran all of our software. And we had a one-line rsync shell script that I wrote that would grab the code from Subversion and it would push it to the one server. That was deployment. And everyone's like, well, that's fine for now. And I was like, no, we're going to keep doing that. So like every couple of weeks, every couple of months, people will be like, my co-founders, other engineers will be like, I think it's time for us to slow down and go to, they wouldn't say it this way. They would, to me, go to a larger batch delivery mechanism. And I'd be like, no, it actually isn't time. We're actually never going to do that. So stop suggesting it. And of course, it didn't matter. People, that's how software development was done. So anyway, so that was all happening, from the beginning of InView. And I was just stubborn and adamant that we try it this way. And I would always try to say, look, I get that you don't think this is a good idea, but tell me specifically the problem we're going to have. And then let's test to see if that problem manifests. And if it does, we'll figure out how to mitigate it. Because I know the problems that go in the traditional route leads. And so in time, then we met Steve Blank. And he was an investor in InView. And he was in our first seed round, which was maybe 6 or 9 months after we'd started the company. We raised that money from him. And, part of the deal was we had to audit his class at Berkeley. And, from our point of view, it was like, we lived in Palo Alto. He was teaching at Berkeley. That's like a, 90-minute drive because there's traffic and stuff to get around the Bay Area. So that was like a big pain. We're like, oh, God, I have to schlep, once a week or twice, whatever it was, down to Berkeley. But it's like, on the other hand, he's going to write a check for $50,000. So drive 90 minutes, for 12 weeks. Like, it's actually not that bad a deal. Basically, if he'd said you had to stand on your head to get the check, we would have thought that was equally valuable. And it just so happened, I was as surprised, and we were quite surprised that we actually found the class useful. It was amazing. Customer development at that time, no one had ever heard of it. Steve's book, The Four Steps to Epiphany, was like, it wasn't available on Amazon. I had to drag Steve kicking and screaming into putting it on Amazon. Because he wasn't thinking of it as something for the world to read. He was thinking of it as class notes for his class to help him with teaching. And in those days, you guys have probably read the book, you understand, it's like, I can't wait for it to be revised, but it's 9,000 steps and sub-steps. There's 4 steps, each have 29 sub-steps. And he used to lecture that way. Like the class, everything in the book is a slide that went to the class. A 90-minute lecture from Steve would be like, let me tell you the 6 steps and the 4 sub-steps. And every week you keep going on this, and it felt like a death march because you knew how many steps there were. It's like pedagogy 101. It's like, don't make people feel like they have to run a marathon just to get the concept. And I remember sitting in the room and being like, this is brilliant. And being really offended. I was really mad at him. Because he used to talk about, and if you read the book, it's still written this way, that product development is done, in this very linear alpha, beta, first customer ship. And customer development in those days was all about how do you, as the marketing guy, convince the engineers to stop being such idiots and like listen to a customer say like every once in a while. Like you agree to them, they'll have a meeting like once every 6 months where I'll tell you the stuff I've learned and I'll integrate into your ridiculous waterfall linear thing, because that's been the experience. That's what the engineers did. And I remember being so mad being in the class, like, no, that's not how engineering is done. We're not like that. And but he was the legendary Silicon Valley investor and professor, and I'm just a kid in the class. I couldn't be like, excuse me, I want to object. So it took me a long time to work up the courage, to actually have a meeting with, sit down and be like, I have this other set of beliefs, and it was like, it was a meeting of the minds, and he was a great mentor. And but all that happened, and it still actually didn't solve my problem, because I made everybody in the company read Steve's book. And then I expected that the next day, the arguments would be done. Like, problem solved, we're now doing customer development. And here's what happened. The next day, everyone's like, yes, we are definitely doing customer development. And then I'd catch somebody, writing a specification document. And I'd be like, I thought we were doing customer development. They're like, oh, I am. Like, did we read the same book? And they're like, oh, no, Steve says you should do that. And I'd be like, no. I just talked to the guy. I'm pretty sure that what you're doing, and we would meet with VCs. We went to with a VC that said, we love Steve's books. We're all customer development. We want to invest in customer development as thesis. And we're like, oh, finally, a VC who gets it. We took the whole pitch. We explain it to them. We bring them inside. They're like, awesome, perfect. We want to invest. First thing you need to do is hire someone to write some MRDs, which are marketing requirements documents, for those that don't know, which is like one of the things that Steve hates more than all other things in the world. And we're like, did you read this? Because like it wasn't, people had kind of like paid it lip service. We're like, yeah, this seems like vaguely like a good idea, but they didn't really understand. And certainly, there was nothing in that paradigm that could help with the problem of why. But okay, get all that, get out of the building, it's all good. But like, wait, why are we shipping code 50 times a day? That's still crazy. And yeah, I kept hiring engineers, someone who worked 25 years in the software industry, who's way older than me, who would come in from their big company job, and we'd hire them, and we'd be like, hey, here's how it's done. And they'd be like, no, kid, I'm going to tell you how it's done. I don't think you understand software engineering. I'm a professional. I'm like an elite. Let me teach you. They just assume I didn't understand how to release something like once a month, like it was normally done. And I had to be the guy to say, no, we're going to do it this crazy way. So I was like desperate for any kind of intellectual framework that would help me just give language to why that was helpful. And that's when I discovered lean manufacturing and all the language around batch size and cycle time. That was like being struck by a lightning bolt out of the blue. I was like, oh my God, we've all been taught this manufacturing style of software development, and they haven't used it in manufacturing since the 60s. So why are we using it as a model for 21st century? It was like, holy moly, and then to then try to apply, adapt that framework to work in a startup context. That's been my life's work for a couple of years.
So you said you sort of started to worry about becoming that guy, right? So the same people that you were trying to convince that didn't get it, and you and the idea is, I guess, that the lean framework can allow you to validate all that. So how's that going? What are you learning from that right now? What are the latest things that may or may not be validated, the signals that are popping up, weaknesses, things to improve?
No, thanks. I love that question. Yeah, because people always used to say to me, I'd be like, we're going to do this, and they'd be like, well, says who? What companies have done this and been successful? And I was like, we're a startup. If Microsoft's already doing it, then that means it would have been a good idea 15 years ago. It'd be like, ancient. We should be thinking for ourselves. And everyone would be like, no, I'd pretty much rather just do what Microsoft's doing. And I was like, okay, one day, there'll be another entrepreneur having that same argument with their co-founders, and they'll be like, says who? They'll be like, says that guy. That random guy on the internet says. And for some reason, that's good enough. I mean, I find it quite bizarre that argument from authority works. I think it's one of the worst arguments in the entire universe. Because how do you know that what worked for that guy will work for you? And there's like 50 different things. I mean, it's like logical fallacy heaven. 15 of them in there. So yeah, I worry a lot. Like, it's useful to be that guy. I hope that it gives you ammunition to talk to people who want argument from authority. But if you actually allow that to contaminate your own thinking, that this is all a gigantic waste of time. So please don't do that. And so to answer your question, in writing the book, I wound up learning a lot about the ideas themselves. I had been practicing them and teaching them and talking about them, but having to really work it out in detail and try to get into questions like, all right, yes, we all say that, we want to get to product market fit, but what does product market fit actually mean? How would you know it when you see it? How do you measure it? How do you answer the question? How do we know if we're getting closer to product market fit? I had no idea how we would have to answer that. And if you read the book, you'll see there's a large amount of it that's about accounting. Because the biggest surprise to me has been that one of the root problems we have as entrepreneurs is we don't have an accounting system that works, that can measure progress, and therefore we can't be held accountable. And so the reason why VCs and CFOs and all the people who are supposed to hold entrepreneurs accountable, like why entrepreneurs drive them crazy, is we're constantly changing the goalposts and redefining whatever happened as success. And on the previous panel, someone was just telling a great story, which is like, you look in Google Analytics and you find a graph that's up and to the right, and that means you're on track. And that's what Google Analytics is for. It's the best system ever at all times. No matter how badly you're screwing up your business, there will always be at least one graph. And Google Analytics is up and to the right. You can bring that to your board meeting. And it's a disaster. So I've tried to make what I think of as a next generation of testable hypotheses about how we should hold entrepreneurs accountable. What are the specific metrics of it? Exactly what to measure and why. And I believe that accounting system will dramatically improve success rates. That is a completely untested assertion. I hope it's true. It makes intellectual sense to me. And people tell me it's a bad idea. Like they used to tell me that the startup was a bad idea in the early days. So I have some confidence in it. That it bothers people and they don't want to do it. But look, you guys are the ones who have to actually test this and find out. My business, I already told you my whole business model. It's too simple to need any of this complicated stuff. So I'm not doing it myself. You guys have to be the ones to do it. And for God's sakes, please tell the rest of us what works and doesn't, so we can evolve this thing a little further.
So do people come back? Do people read like 3 blog posts that you wrote, misinterpret them, do stuff, and then come to you and say, hey, it doesn't work?
All the time. Oh, it's the most common. That's the great thing about having a book, because now I can be like, well, did you read the book? Yeah, mean, I was joking with the Lean Startup Machine guys. I was Skyping in yesterday that we developed a new hater yesterday. Every once in a while, a hater shows up, and they just, really, this person on Twitter just post the most offensive, vile comments about our, the people involved with Lean Startup and the kind of behaviors we do in the privacy of our homes, etc. And how he knows is not clear to me. It's amazing. But he actually posted like someone who had written an in-depth critique of like the 10 reasons why Lean Startup is a bad idea. And it was real, like, I love stuff like that. The thing I was looking forward to most in writing the book and doing all this publicity touring is like, I thought it would provoke the next backlash. And we've gone through several backlashes. I'm sure you guys saw the Fat Startup, and that was took like the design community some time to like be okay with that. I mean, we've kind of been through these backlashes and come out stronger each time. So I was like, I'm excited for the next one. It hasn't come because, of course, now I understand, right? People, when you do argument from authority, as the authority gets more famous, like the backlash becomes less likely because people don't think about the ideas for themselves. They're just like, well, I guess if I saw it on TV, it must make sense. It's like, no. So this someone like wrote down the 10 things, and they were really good, like solid, interesting ideas. Not correct in my opinion, but like good critiques. Like, well, is it really scientific? That was one of the questions. Is it proven? I go out of my way to never say this is a proven methodology because it certainly is not. I mean, that's going to require academic research that's going to take years. People write their PhD theses on this, someday. It would be great. I'm all for that, but you can't wait for that as an entrepreneur. So is it a science? Are we really doing hypothesis testing? Do our hypotheses, in the history of science, would they count as falsifiable hypotheses? If we do it right, I think the answer is yes. Anyway, going all the way through, is it really lean? So is this really, in fact, a quality improvement methodology, that is true to lean principles, or is it just slapping the metrics dashboard on the thing before? And so it was very thoughtful. And yet, I was so pretty frustrated. Like, I answered every single one of these specific questions in great detail in this book I just wrote. So how come you could read it and not get that from it? But, it takes a lot of time. And it's easy for people to get set off. I had to do a lot of test reading of the book. And a lot of people gave me their feedback, and they would just be like, no, this book is terrible, it doesn't have any practical examples in it at all. I was like, that's just factually not true. So what happened? What happened was, chapter 1 in the draft that they read was so ungodly bad, and in fact it was. It was all abstract and theoretical. I used to start the book with a discussion of scientific paradigms of Thomas Kuhn, and it's all very abstract thing, which made test readers want to vomit. And a lot of people, they didn't even get past chapter 1. And they just drew the conclusion that the rest of the book must be just like chapter 1, and therefore there's no practical examples. And I was like, no, you're supposed to read the whole thing. I was like, wait, no, that's my business plan. I want you to read the whole thing, but it's my job to try and actually get people in. So trying to, figuring out how do we avoid those landmines, those little things where it's mostly correct, but not entirely correct, and that sets somebody off and gets them mad. That's really what we're trying to avoid. Hi. Come on up.
I was wondering, there's now university programs, right? People aren't using Lean Startup to help in their current business. They're using it to prepare for a career of businesses.
Yeah.
Where do you think, beyond reading up on the literature, what do you think is the most useful thing someone can do when they're 2 years away from graduation, or they're a year away from quitting their job? What can you do to actually create these skills in yourself and create the foundation so that when you take the leap, things go good instead of bad?
Oh yeah. You have to do stuff because the problem with academia for our purposes is that it's almost impossible to have a failure, a real failure. You can have a political failure, people don't like your paper or whatever. I mean, you can't, it doesn't have that kind of hard-edged failure that having a great idea that customers hate has. And if you've never actually lived through the experience of having something that you believed with all your heart, absolutely people would like, and then not one other person in the whole world liked it, it sounds like you can understand it, but if you've never actually experienced that, if you only were half-hearted committed to it in the first place, well, I'm curious if people might like this thing, that doesn't count. You have to believe, because human beings are hardwired to protect ourselves from the fact that our mental model of the world is extremely inaccurate, pathetically inaccurate. We're so wrong about so many things, and since that's an unpleasant experience, we've evolved a psychology to protect us from having to find that out. And the whole point of science is to work around that bug in the design. So I think the most important preparation is to, build things, launch them, and test them. To actually go through the process of trying to build something. And it's why I like, the weekend programs like the Startup Machine, where people have to they have to actually make something, test it, see what happens, iterate. And I'm amazed. It has completely redefined my understanding of what the word productivity means. Because what people can get done in 2 days when they are guided by this framework is so radically, bigger than what I had ever previously thought. It's amazing. So I think people need to have that experience. I think that's what's valuable.
So when you talk about this, I'm thinking about one of my experiences, and I've seen it in other people too, where so I was starting to read about Lean Startup, and I had a startup, and it was a really great idea. And so I started testing stuff, and then I had some money from a few wins from a previous startup, so I could afford to keep testing stuff. And I was testing completely the wrong things, and it took about 6 months before the money started to run out, before I realized, hang on, I've been doing Lean Startup, I thought I was doing Lean Startup, right? But so how do you help those people? How do you help them test? Because the thing I wasn't testing was the thing that was really what I put my ego behind to make this startup work.
Yeah, exactly. But you're not testing the iceberg, you're moving the deck chairs.
I guess so, yeah.
I mean, don't feel bad, we all do it.
But how do we help people? How do you address it when people do that and they're like, I'm doing Lean Startup, and then they're not testing the right thing?
I mean, you want my honest answer?
Yeah.
Generally, when I meet people like that, I just tell them, listen, I'll catch you on your next startup. There's no sweat on my back. I'm just visiting, but you live here. And if your startup fails, I'm fundamentally indifferent. Not you, your friend. You have a friend. It's not my business if you did it right. Or failure is the greatest teacher. And my hope in traveling the world doing these talks is basically, I don't really believe people come to a talk and change their behavior. I mean, every once in a while I get an email from someone who's like, I was in your talk, and then my co-founder and I literally left the conference, flew back to our office, and immediately went into emergency pivot mode because we realized during your talk that we were doomed. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that happens every once in a while. But most people are not like that. They're like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I'll be I'll get a little lean. Why not? A little lean. If the whole system is good, a little part of the system is good too. I'll do some lean washing and I'll feel fine. And truly, for those people, I really think failure is the best teacher. When you finally, when the money runs out, then you're like, oh my God, why did I wish I could have those 6 months back because I was testing all this little stuff. So doing the process of testing does not make you lean. The whole point of lean is for you to be right about what actually delights customers. It just so happens that the way to be right is to do testing, but we really get confused. What is the thing? What are we actually trying to do? It is not doing a split test is it's not meritorious. There's no gold star. It's the horrible thing about entrepreneurship. Nothing you do will ever get you a gold star. You can't be promoted. There's no external authority blessing you, telling you you're doing a good job. You just either get to stay alive or you die. That's it. So success is you stay alive. Congratulations, you didn't die this week. But that's not very satisfying to those of us who grew up in these education systems where we constantly get gold stars and we work in companies where we constantly get promoted. So it's really frustrating. And I always ask myself, if I'm not running out of money right now, I think about 6 months from now, and I am running out. I'm going to be running out of money. Try to do that mental leap to say, 6 months from now, when I'm running out of money and everything's gone to hell, will I be glad? Will I be praising my past self for the thing I'm working on right now, or will I be super pissed? Why are you wasting your time doing that thing? And if you can really imagine yourself in a future where things are going to hell, that can create that motivation. But it's really quite difficult.
Some businesses are very difficult, it seems, whereas others are relatively easy. And I know people talk about you got to be in the hot market and stuff, and that makes everything else easy. I mean, can you talk about how you would, if you're just about to start, right?
Yeah.
There's a zillion ideas. You could start anything.
Yep.
How do you do? What do you do?
This is one of the horrible things about entrepreneurship, is that everything, and I mean everything, cuts both ways. So you can tell me any attribute of your startup, your personality, your business plan, and I'm pretty good at rhetoric, so I can immediately on the fly make you an argument why that thing is great for your startup or horrible for your startup. For example, I have a product and it's going to be incredibly difficult to build. And I'm ooh, that's going to be hard. I don't know if you'll ever be able to build it. Or I'm going to be that is so great. Oh my God. If you can make that work, the thing is so hard, no one else will be able to do it, so you'll have the whole market to yourself. And both arguments are 100% true. And if you're like, I have a co-founder, he's so visionary, and he just sees the future, and everyone he talks to like believes what he says, he just has the magic touch. I'm like, that's so great. You're going to be able to recruit partners and raise money, and it's going to be so fun, and awesome. Probably you're following next Steve Jobs. Or I could be like, you're so screwed, because you're talking about someone who has the power to deny reality. And that's going to be handy in the short term. And one day you're going to rue the day. We can do that with everything. So given that that's true, there is no way to objectively choose the right idea that will be the most likely to succeed. I think that whole line of thinking is just wrong. I'm from California, so sometimes what I say is comes across a little woo-woo elsewhere. So apologies for those who are like, wait a minute, I did not want to hear about this. But I really believe that entrepreneurship is in fact a process of self-discovery. All of this stuff is in service of discovering what you really care about. And if you're not working on something that you really care about, you have to stop, because you have no vision, and you can't be successful without vision, because just like if you're a scientist and you have no theory about what you're trying to accomplish in the first place, you'll just be doing experiments in the lab forever. You'll never actually have that kind of breakthrough. So you have to figure out, you have to ask yourself, what am I so committed to that I'm willing to do take an insane step, which is to become an entrepreneur, in order to see it done. And I think most people actually that's actually such a painful decision. It really requires you to admit things about yourself, about what you're really like, which most of us don't really want to know. And it requires you to foreclose the millions of other things you could dedicate your life to. And when I was first thinking about being a startup and thinking about whether to talk about it, it took me a while to be like, wait, why am I doing this again? Shouldn't I be off making a lot of money doing something else? I turned down a job at Facebook. That was pretty lucrative mistake. I keep a running total of how much that cost me. It does not yet cross the amount of money I turned down for not working at Google. So, I don't have the best track record at that. But I really was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I finally got to the point where I was like, no. The thing that has really bothered me, to the point where I was ready to throw chairs, is watching the incredibly talented people I've had the privilege of working with wasting their lives. I say stop wasting people's time. That was the thing for me that finally connected. I was like, oh right, it's not just my friends whose lives are being thrown away on projects that are doomed from the start. It's millions of people. And think about the raw amount of time and energy we are pouring into all this stuff for no good reason. It's the emperor truly has no clothes, and the human toll of that management mistake is really devastating, and therefore we normally don't think about it, because you're that is just too depressing. It's like thinking about global poverty. It's really, you really want to wake up every morning and think about that? And I was like, yes, that I can work on that. That's a big enough problem. That's going to keep me going. Even when people write blog posts and say Eric Ries is a bad person, okay, that stings, but this is important.
No wonder you didn't work for Facebook then. You're trying to save people's time.
I officially have no comment.
I want to ask you questions about PATH. You mentioned that in the book.
Yeah.
And actually, the founder last December, he had a talk in our web. They said they actually move away from that kind of lean startup.
I heard that, yeah.
And
I was like, Dave.
yeah, and I'm wondering why. Is it because once you reach the product market fit, and is that different stories or?
I honestly don't know. I have not actually spoken to Dave in ages, and I don't know the story.
He said the reason is mobile iteration needs to be very fast, and then lean startup can't really match that kind of fast iterations, and then I get a bit confused about all the reasons behind that.
That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, I think that as an entrepreneur, you have to do things, you have to create a public image for yourself that matches your corporate strategy. And so publicity for successful startups is actually quite important and quite an art. And when these guys start to play in the major leagues, they do stuff like that. And I think, they position themselves, think about the companies you admire the most, they have been positioned intentionally for you to believe that stuff. So I basically ignore stuff that startup founders say at big conferences and in public and put out press releases, because it's it's generally designed to sell people an image. And so, you know, if Dave says that to me personally in private, like I'll be very interested in his critique. I think he's a super smart guy. I love Path. It's a great product. A lot of people ask me, like, you know, why do they have to wait? Like, shouldn't they not have launched the first version of Path? Couldn't they have just launched the second version? The second version is a good one. Why did they wait? Like, it was a bleeding sharp mistake to like publicly fail with the first thing. I was like, I'm pretty sure if they had the ability, if they knew what Path 2 was going to be, they certainly would have launched that in the first place. But like, it always looks obvious in retrospect. You have to go through the failure to get to plan B, borrow free. So yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but I'll wait to hear about it from you.
I would like to go back to the previous point. Excuse me if it's really provocative, but I personally do believe it's important that you need to do what you're really interested in. It's like my personal belief. But what you actually do, if whatever you personally believe in or you're really interested in, is maybe not actually matching market needs. Like, especially we're having a crisis right now, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And some things are just not maybe possible to implement, or some markets actually are as unattractive, especially if you're a startup, if you don't have market base, customer base already. Can you maybe comment on that? I admit I haven't read the book yet, so
That's okay.
sorry
No
already.
problem. No problem. I was actually thinking about this question a lot on the way over here, because I decided I would try to walk from my hotel to this venue. It didn't seem like it was very far on the map. and you know, I've been in a lot of big cities, and for me, a big city is like Manhattan. It's laid on a huge grid. So you want to get from point A to point B. You can you have immediate deductive ability to be like, I know exactly how far it is. I know exactly how long it takes to get there. I know I can navigate my way through the cities. That's like engineering thinking heaven. It's like someone else has laid out this beautiful context for you, which now allows you to reason within it to get where you want to go. And I wound up, pivoting quite a few times on my way here on Twitter, and I was like, oh, that's actually right. Like, I was in a context where that kind of thinking didn't do me any good. But luckily, I had a phone, and it could tell me where I was. So I had a GPS. So I always knew where I was, and I knew vaguely where I wanted to go. And so if I made a wrong turn, it wasn't like I made a wrong turn. Like all these crazy loops and U-shaped streets, and I wound up in like some pretty odd places. I was like, I was walking the direction I wanted to go. How did I wind up here? I don't know. But at no point was I was like, gosh, that's it. I give up. Like, it's impossible to get to the Roberts Engineering Building. Like, it's possible. It's just a question of how, do you want to keep going? Are you really willing to give it another try? And eventually you get too frustrated and give up. And my cab driver actually, on a different trip, told me about the knowledge that you have to master to become a taxi driver. Also, I was really impressed with, wow, that is a lot. And also, you guys have the best euphemisms for things. The knowledge. That's so cool. I was like, that's a different kind of learning than the engineering learning of how to navigate a grid of streets. That is like the true test of amazing memorization. And luckily, somebody else has in the past figured out the business model of being a cab driver and has created this set of tasks that if you just apply yourself to them diligently, you will know everything you need to know to get anywhere you want to go in this situation. And neither of those is really a model for the kind of learning we have to do as entrepreneurs. It's much more like you get dropped in a random city. You're not even sure what city it is. You don't speak the language. And you kind of vaguely know where you want to go. And it's like, now find your way around. And will the knowledge help you in that situation? No. Will engineering, knowing how to navigate a grid of streets help you? No. The only thing that will help you is being able to learn how things work in this place and how to get around. And you might have been given an assignment that requires you to cross an ocean. And so you're like, it's impossible, I can't get across an ocean. You're like, wait, no, is it impossible? No, but I have to build a boat. Good God. I don't know about boat. Does that sound familiar to any entrepreneurs in the room? I have to do what? Okay. All the great entrepreneurs I know are they get the bad news, and they're like, okay, that's going to be a horrible, horrible pivot. But that's it. That's what we do. That's our thing, is we see a brick wall, we bang our head against the wall for a while, see if we can knock it over, and if not, then go around. Normally people go around first. I don't know why we like to just slam into the thing full speed. So that's the thing. In the book, when you read it, you'll learn. I say a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. So it is a different route to get to our destination. And where people get this whole thing backwards is like, imagine you get in your car and you go to the GPS and you're like, GPS, where should I go today? The GPS doesn't know. Its job is to take you there. So strategy and business model and all its testing is to help you validate or invalidate your current belief about the route to the place to go. It doesn't tell you a thing about your vision. It is actually intellectually incoherent to say you're going to pivot your vision. That is, let's say, not even a meaningful concept. Makes no sense.
Would you then say that it's maybe really important to actually educate that at a like early stage in education to actually implement it much sooner in the way they will society actually thinks about such a thing than just like starting off with now, for example, master's students, so it's a little late maybe, and actually if I were to start earlier.
I mean, listen, our industrial education system was designed for an industrial world where we're trying to teach people how to follow instructions well. And that's just not as valuable a skill as it used to be. Because we're not doing routine and rote work as a civilization as often as we used to, in fact. Like, if you extrapolate even the basic forecasting skills, you will realize that any work that can be automated will be. So it's simply a waste of human time to have people doing routine rote work that could be automated. So it's like, that's going away, and we have to think about, as a society, well, what kind of work are we going to do? Like, we have massive unemployment, partly because we don't know what to do with all those people. But I think that's a huge opportunity, because those people are not just two hands, they're also one brain. So there's an incredible amount of creative talent potential in all the people that used to be doing routine work that we could harness for something else. And if you notice, what is the discipline of figuring out, creatively what kind of work to be done? That is entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is about to go from a kind of important, nice to have part of our, economic thinking to an absolutely vital, central paradigm for getting work done. Thank you for the question.
I'll go back to the book. I like the story with you when you said that basically you were about to approach deadline, you want to launch, but you were scared not to launch because you never know what's going to happen with your customers, how crap they think your product is.
Yeah.
And you launched. But in your book you described that in you actually didn't have any traction. So
That's
you
right.
understood that they are not interested in launch. What would be the other case if you launch and people start thinking, okay, it's a bad product, and you need good sample, you need at least 100 people or something like that to have some tangible data, right?
Yeah.
But this is your community product, the early adopters, which are the people here. And if they start thinking about your product, it's bad, it can have a different impact on your product.
Yeah.
So we have this.
I understand this is not a hypothetical question.
Yeah, so I really
No entrepreneur ever asks a hypothetical question. Don't feel bad. It's okay. For your friend's company, I got it.
It's right though. You want to fail, right?
Yes,
This
you
is
do.
learning.
Yes.
I really want to launch now, but I'm pretty sure that this doesn't work well. It will go wrong. Like people will
Yeah.
talk about
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's going to be so painful.
Yeah.
Oh, listen,
When
you're going to hate it.
that.
Yeah. You're going to have to get over it. What I feel bad about the story in the book is that I had to, because I couldn't, I have the same problem that the people who make movies about startups have, which is that the actual specific practice of doing entrepreneurship is so tedious and boring, it does not work in a storytelling format. You cannot tell an interesting story that is true about entrepreneurship. It's impossible. You have to take shortcuts and you have to edit out. So in the book, it makes it sound like we launched this product, and then 2 days later, we're like, it's not working, we need to pivot. That's 9 months of time I have compressed into dot. What did we do during the 9 months? It is every freaking day launching dozens of features and constantly improving and fixing and whatever, and watching the metrics, the actionable real, not the vanity metrics, but the really important metrics stay completely flat for months. 100 customers a day used our product. And every day, one of them would buy. That was our average. And I was like a conspiracy theorist very soon. I was like, did today's customers get on a conference call with yesterday's customers? Hey guys, how many of you bought the product? Well, okay, be careful, because it was so steady. I mean, it's an unbelievably steady 4 months. That's what in science they would call a time-controlled, series trial, where each trial is independent. And so, boy, was that painful. So that's what I hope for you, is that you do that and don't wait 9 months, draw a conclusion a little sooner. But there's good news. If you do the math, you're wait 9 months, 100 customers a day, didn't you expose thousands of customers to this horrible version of this product and destroy your brand equity? They say, yep, we sure did. And what was the consequences of doing that? Nothing. Because the opposite of a good idea that spreads virally is not a bad idea that spreads virally. It's total indifference. Customers don't care. They forget about you the next minute. That's actually being unknown is a huge asset. Enjoy it. It's actually way harder. If I got up on stage today and I was like, I'm launching a startup tomorrow. people would care. Ooh, we're going to see, does Eric actually know what he's doing? It'd be like, it'd be speculation, all these people would try, don't even really care. And like, it would be all this extra pressure that's like completely wasted, which is why, like, if I was doing a startup, I would definitely not tell anybody about it. Like, it would totally launch under another brand name. It wouldn't have my name on it. That would be insane. Why would you want all that extra scrutiny and attention? No, you do it, like, do it in a small number of people. If they hate it, apologize. If someone's mad at you, practice, look in the mirror and be like, I am sorry. How can I make it right? What can I do? And like, every once in a while you will have a mad customer, and when you say, I'm sorry, how can I help you? They're going to be so happy. It's like actually better for most early adopters to be listened to than to have gotten the product in the first place. So launch today. You can do it tomorrow if you want. I'll tell you what, if you actually launch this product in the next 24 hours, I will do it.
I wouldn't be around to make a call. I haven't promised anything.
Everyone saw it.
It's not a final bid idea.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes, one more question.
We'll do our best.
I just want to say I'm doing the Technology Entrepreneurship Masters at UCL as well, and we have these guest lectures, and some of these people who come to talk to us, they say it's important to launch something in an area where you have expertise, and some people say there's been great success if you don't have the expertise and you still take this big risk in going to it. What do you think about that, and also how do you think Lean can help if you actually do the risk study?
Oh, they're both right.
Yeah.
They're just, they're both, I mean, that's why going to startup lectures drives you crazy. Because like, the person comes in and is like, you should make sure to launch with great design. You know, because Steve Jobs would launch with bad design. Like the next guy's like, design doesn't matter at all. Like look at Craigslist and eBay, and then like you have these arguments. Well, it's because of this. Like there's no way to judge from all these anecdotes what's really right. Plus, it couldn't matter less. Because why is there any reason you should believe that what worked in some other time and place for another person would work in this time and place for you? I mean, truly, like, unless you really have a deep, deep understanding of all of the relevant factors, you can never make an argument like that. So the point of Lean is to help you figure out, okay, for you, with your skills, in the place where you are, what can you do? And so you formulate a theory. It can be high risk, low risk. Remember I said before, like, it could be good news that you're totally ignorant and you're going to leave a, like in cartoons when you run through a wall and there's like a cutout of the shape of the entrepreneur in the wall. Like, maybe that's going to happen. Or maybe you're going to run to the wall and bounce right off and you don't have to go around. Like, I couldn't say. Yeah, it could be Harry Potter. I noticed that track was under construction. I was very suspicious. What's going on here? So I think that's what we're going to try to do, is give you tools to figure out what you're capable of, rather than having to worry about like what would Richard Branson have done or whatever. Good. Thank you.
Daniel pointed out, said do the math, so I did the math. You can stretch for another 15, 20 minutes in here, and then just push the whole evening back. We'll probably get out of here around 6 by the end of the weekend.
What I suggest actually is that we just take a very quick bio break, because I really have to use the bathroom. And also that will give anyone who needs to go a chance to go on the time that we promised. And I promise I will come right back and answer as many questions